So let's actually start. Let's start today's class. So I'll do a recap of where we are coming from. Okay, I'll do a recap of where we are coming from. If you remember, we said we wanted to host an application in AWS, right? And we said it's a container-based application. And we said one way to do that is really to use a container orchestration service. And we said there is an option in AWS, right? It's called ECS. So we took ECS and we started building. The first thing we did was we said we wanted a practical example, an example that we could show and tell our friends that we're building stuff. And we said we picked Ghost. Ghost is a CMS, right? So we took the Ghost container and just ran it as a service on AWS, right? But we knew that for us to have that done, we needed more or less like load balancing. Like you can see this is a load balance. Like there's a load balancer. And the reason for a load balancer is because we want somebody on the internet to be able to see it. If not, there's no way for you to see it, right? So, and that's exactly how we architected the solution. We have a VPC. Inside the VPC, there's a public subnet. There is a private subnet. Inside the private subnet is where we host ECS, the service. It's also where we have our Aurora database, right? Where the Ghost service is talking to. Because this service, this Ghost, as it is right now, you can sign in, you can register, you can do many things. It just means that it's using a database behind the scene. All that is shown in this diagram. We now reached our first problem. The first problem we reached was that we needed an extra service, right? That the Ghost will be talking to in the form of a webhook service. And that was the first time we're seeing a situation whereby one service needed to talk to another service. And we said the quick way to solve it is to have one task. We put two containers there, right? And then it was more or less like a local connection. And there we were reaching it using localhost. But we revised that solution in the second video. We said that's not a good approach because now you're tying both containers together. You're tying more or less like the two containers. You're tying them together. When you have one task controlling two containers, it means that each container will not be able to scale on their own. But if you think about it, a webhook service is different from a service that is seen in the UI. Maybe more people are seeing this. Maybe less people are seeing the webhook service. So it means they have their own different scaling needs. And that's like a very good example for why you should break them into their own different services. And we did exactly that in the last video. We said we will create two services, one for Ghost, one for webhooks. Both of them will have their own task definition, so they'll be able to spawn up their own task. And we did that. And we said, this is now the point where we're able to do it, but we want a very seamless way of connecting the two services, right? Is it not possible we do something like webhooks.tiktok on port 8000/webhook for us to reach the other service? And we showed it in the last call. But how did we do it? We did it using service discovery with CloudMap, right? And we said CloudMap, basically, you start with a namespace. We created a namespace. Behind the scene, it was using Route 53, right? It uses Route 53 to create a hosted zone. Inside that hosted zone, it creates records for you, right? And for that reason, it was very easy for us to more or less like, instead of calling the task directly using an IP address, we were able to call it directly using a DNS name, right? In this case, a friendly one, something like webhooks.tiktok, on port 8000/webhook, right? And it worked. We saw it in the last video. So in this video, I'm just trying to extend that solution for you to see that there are other ways you can also do service discovery inside of ECS, right? And that's the second option I'm going to be talking about. So if you think about it, what we've done, we've used Terraform to provision everything we've done. We've pushed the webhooks container to ECR, right? We've already started running it as a service. It's actually running. And we can prove that, right? And we did it in the last class. But how can you prove it? You go to a service, you go to the Ghost service, you go to a task, which is a container that the service is running. And then when you check a running container, one thing we did was we added ECS exec, right? So the idea is for you to be able to, more or less, be able to connect to your container. Let's see. This should actually connect. What's happening? This is 5, this is 6. Why is it starting that container and starting it again? It's actually running. But let's see. This one is not, it's not running yet. Let's give it some time. Because what we did was to now exec into the container, and then from there, we want to be able to ping the other task, right? But we don't want to be using IP addresses. IP addresses are really ephemeral. They will change at some point. So we don't want to be using the IP address to reach out to the service. Let's see the logs. What's going on here? It's running. I'm not sure why it stopped, but let's see. This is still pending. Let's see. Yeah, it's running now. I'm not sure why it stopped in the first place, but I'm just going to try to connect right? And we said if we want to connect, I prefer to just use the bash shell, right? We'll run and we'll connect. And I said, usually I have like a small command. So it's going to create a session for us. We have a session. Here is just, we did it the last time. But all we're just going to do is we'll update, we'll install some things, right? For us to be able to run some commands in the machine. So I'm just going to do that. Once we do that, the next thing we want to do is to see if we can connect to the other machine, right? We'll try to connect. And what we'll do is that, in this case, we'll start just connecting using the IP address. But that's not what we want to solve. We want to solve for using a friendly name instead of using the IP address. But let's just install first and try to connect. So what we can do is we'll go to task. We'll go to the webhooks task because that's the one we want to connect to, right? So we'll go to here. We'll go to the task, the webhook task. We'll go to any of the tasks that is running. There's one in this case, and we'll look for the IP address, right? So there's a private IP address. And I think I said that if you call this IP address, right, you call HTTP on that IP address, and you paste, oopsie. I thought I copied this just now. Let me see. I thought I copied just the IP address. I think it's this one, private IP. I'll copy it. And then we'll do call HTTP, and then do this, and then do 8000, and then do /health. That's where the endpoint is, and then we'll do this, right? And then we saw that, yes, it returns that is healthy, right? This healthy is actually coming from code. We saw it. It's actually the application itself, right? This is exactly what is returning. Status is healthy. But we said that this is not nice. Like, there's no way we can be doing this, calling directly the IP address, right? Because usually a service will be backed by multiple containers, multiple IP addresses. You don't want to keep track of the IP address. Rather, you want to keep track of the service, such that regardless of the amount of IP addresses that are behind that service, you still can connect to any of them, right? That's really how it's done. So what we are going to be doing, we're going to be using the second option, right? And that introduces us to, the third option I mentioned, right? So the third option I mentioned, the first option was using a load balancer. The second option was using service discovery with Cloud Map. And then the third option is really using Service Connect, right? So Service Connect is the concept. I think I explained it last time. I said that you have your own container. Right now, you can see our container here is just one container, right? So if you scroll here to more or less like the task, let's go to here. There's only one container right now. There's only one container running. How does ECS how does Service Connect work? Service Connect will put a sidecar into your task. That's really what it does. So what it does is that it puts a sidecar. ECS will inject a sidecar into your task. So what it means is that there will be your container, and then there will be another container. What happens is that if a service wants to connect to another service, it's going to go through the sidecar to reach the other service. And basically, that's exactly how it does service discovery. But the difference between the other one that we saw was like the other one uses Route 53. So a lot of it is really, it's trying to do health check. It's trying to do, it's pretty much health check, Route 53, right? But Service Connect will do more things for you. It will be able to do things like retries. So there are many more other things that Service Connect is going to be able to do for you. That's something that is just on the DNS layer is not going to be able to answer. So what we're trying to achieve here is that if you look at it, you have one service. So let's see, we have one service, we have another service. So let's assume that if one service is going to communicate with the other, how would that look like? How it will look like is that if we actually want to break this a bit, so instead of us using that, I'm just going to drag something else. So let me actually drag a different box. So what it means is that if we want to look at a typical connection, right, between the two services, it means the ghost service, right? So we're just going to, let's actually just paste any of them. Let's do any of these services. So I'm just going to do service A. In this case, I'll be specific. I'll say this is ghost, right? So this is the ghost service, and there's also the webhook service. So there's the webhooks service, right? So the webhooks. So if this communication is going to happen, we know that both of them will need a task, right? So both of them will need more or less like task powering them. So I'm just going to bring this down a bit. So we know that behind this, there are tasks, right? So we're just going to simplify this and just mention only one task. So in a task, we're actually going to put a text here and say task, right? So we call it a task, right? So it will have its own task here. And then what will happen is that you have the application container itself. So there will be this. So there will be container. And then we'll just bring this a bit, make it a bit small, right? And there will be a sidecar. So we're just going to duplicate this and call it a sidecar, right? So sidecar, good. So there'll be a this, and then there'll be a sidecar. So what it means is that this sidecar is going to manage the connection between the two services, right? So it's going to be here. So what it means is that this webhooks would also have its own sidecar here, and then this Ghost will have its own sidecar. So it means that this is the one that powers webhooks, and then if Ghost wants to reach these webhooks, basically, it knows exactly how, right? Especially if he knows behind the scene, it is using his own task. If he gets there, the sidecar actually manages the connection between the two sides of things. In the other case, we actually used Route 53 and CloudMap, meaning there was a namespace, there was Route 53. It was basically DNS. So when you call the URL, it gives you two IP addresses that are behind that DNS. We saw how that was changing in Route 53. But in this case, a sidecar is in between. So when you're sending requests to the webhooks, it is intercepted by the sidecar, and the sidecar is able to interpret the request for you. And there's so many other things that happens behind the scene that pretty much you don't see, but behind the scene, it happens in the sidecar. So if we're going to look at that right now, we said we have one problem right now, right? We are still talking to the IP address directly. So we're just calling the IP address directly, but we want to be able to call using like a friendly name. The last time we did it, we used CloudMap. Now we're just going to use Service Connect. So how do we go about it? We'll go into cluster, so the ECS cluster itself. We'll go to clusters, and then we'll go to here, and then we'll check the services, right? Because here we want to do service-to-service communication. The first service we're going to go to is very simple. We'll go to the Ghost service itself, because both of them, they will need to support it, right? So what we can do is that here we'll go to this one and say, what do you call it? We'll update the service. What we'll be doing is that the last time, if you remember, we did service discovery, right? This time we're going to be doing Service Connect, and we'll say we want to enable Service Connect, right? It's going to be asking us, is this client side, meaning connects to other services in the namespace, which is exactly what we want here, because Ghost is the one connecting to webhooks, right? Nothing is connecting to it inside of ECS in this case. So we're going to say yes. For namespace, we're going to create a new namespace. The namespace here is going to be, we're just going to call it dev, right? Or I think we can do exactly what we did the last time. We used TikTok. So we'll call it my TikTok namespace, okay? So then we'll use this. And then we'll pick our VPC. We can leave the TTL as is, and then we'll create the namespace, right? That's exactly the option we used the last time. So API calls, DNS queries. It's not public DNS in this case because the tasks are actually private. So we'll create the namespace. It's going to take a while to create. If you check Route 53, let's see. Remember that a Route 53 is going to create a hosted zone, right? So, the namespace is going to create a hosted zone. So if you check a hosted zone now and you refresh, if you give it some time, the namespace is going to create a hosted zone. So let's see. Let's refresh. Sometimes it takes time to create, but it's creating. Let's see, it's creating the namespace. Is this still creating? One? Let's see. Okay, it has created it, right? So it has created it. So it's TikTok. Right now, there are no services behind the scene. If you check our hosted zone, there is now the TikTok hosted zone, right? Still Route 53 doing its thing, right? So what we are now going to do is we're going back to the service. We'll refresh this. It should now have like a namespace, right? So it's TikTok. What we're now going to check is that it's really client-side. We want it just client-side. So connects to other services in the namespace. But in this case, there's also client server, which we're going to use on the webhook side of things. So once we have that, we're just going to update. We'll do update here. We'll update the service. Maybe we'll update and also force a new deployment, right? So basically just try to have like a new deployment on that service. So we'll update it, force a new deployment. While that is ongoing, we'll go to the second service, right? Because here we just said that Ghost has to connect to the webhook service, right? And that's why we created it as a client. But we also have to go back to the Ghost and the webhooks service itself and also enable Service Connect. So we'll go here and then we'll go to this. So when we go here, we'll also update the service. And then we're also going to just be enabling Service Connect. So we'll go to Service Connect. We'll do this. Now that I think about it, okay, I think I'm going to refresh. Namespace, there is a namespace. Access logs, we can just leave that as is. But we're going to use here, we're going to, are we actually doing Service Connect here? Yeah. Okay. So here is going to say that client server, it's kind of not enabled. And there's a reason. It's just because it requires the port to be named. Right now, our port is not named. So we'll just go and fix that. But we actually want the webhooks itself to be client and server. And the reason is just because it provides an endpoint for this service and connects to other services in the namespace. So it does two things. It provides endpoint for this service, one, so meaning you can connect to it, which is really what we want, because we want the Ghost service to be able to connect to the webhook service. But we can't enable it now, and I know the problem. We have to go to the task definition, we go to the webhooks task definition, we create a new revision. When we create a new revision, basically what we really need to do is that there's a place where we created like a port definition. You can see here, we have a port, but we didn't really name it, right? So we'll just call it a TCP port. That's really one thing you need for that thing to work. Service Connect, it needs like a port name. So we're just going to say TCP 8000, right? So we'll call it 8000. When we have this, we're going to save it. We'll create. So this is now revision 5. So when we have revision 5, we'll go back to the service. So we'll go to cluster, we'll go to service, we'll go to the webhook service again. We will update it this time. And then we'll use the latest revision that we just chose, right? So we just created. So it's more or less like, sorry, this is webhooks. We'll pick the latest revision, 5, and then we'll go again and try to do it. So we were trying to do Service Connect, right? And then we'll say use Service Connect. You can see the client server has now been enabled. Before it was disabled. But now we'll do client server. We'll refresh the namespace. We want it to be TikTok namespace that we created. And that's it, honestly. Add port mappings. You can basically do TCP. This is where you are now going to create this discovery, right? So what do we want to call it? We want to call it webhooks, right? So we'll do webhooks. And then we'll do webhooks, webhooks doc, TikTok, okay, TikTok. And then we'll do port 8000, okay? 8000. Yeah, it's where you can turn on traffic encryption. It just means that when those two services work together, when that communication is happening, you can actually encrypt that traffic, right? But we can leave it as is. So webhooks, the TikTok, and then there's webhooks as the discovery, and then we can actually just leave it as that, and then just update the service. Did I actually choose? Let's actually force a new deployment on that 5. We're just trying to get a fresh deployment. So we're just going to update it. Remember, if you go back to the diagram, there's going to be a sidecar. That's the most important thing. Okay, so there's going to be a sidecar. So if we actually go to the task now, what do you think we're going to see? If we refresh, remember, it's still trying to bring a new task. So service, you go to task. No, we actually need to go to the webhooks service, first of all. And then inside there, we'll check tasks. And then we'll refresh and see this is still 4. The one we updated is 5. So we need that one to come up for us to see if the change is taking place. Okay? So let's see. We'll go to webhooks. And then we'll check for tasks. We'll refresh. It's still not bringing it up just yet, but let's give it some time. So we'll also go to Ghost and see the other one that is bringing up. So task, let's see. This is still 5. I'm not entirely sure why it's deactivating the old one, but let's find out. So it says failed ALB chart. Probably. Let me check something. Is there anything wrong with the load? It failed. So let's something is happening because that task 6 is not coming up. So maybe something is off. Let's just check. Let's check. I think the only thing that could be wrong is let's check the security groups, because that's the only thing. Because it's saying it's failing health check, right? So it's not really connecting. So let's check what could be wrong. So for that service, we'll go to cluster. We'll go to the service. We'll check that Ghost service. We will check once we're there. We'll check the configuration and networking. We'll go to the security group, right? We'll check and see what's happening. The security group right now allows traffic, on ALB, on these ports, right? So what's happening? Outbound rules. There's also outbound rules there. This should work because we're allowing traffic to the Ghost ECS ALB security group. So it's actually configured correctly, but I'm not sure what is actually happening. So let's actually go to the ALB. Let's see, load balancer. Let's go to EC2 and find a load balancer. Let's see what's happening. So you go to load balancers, and then in there, we'll check the load balancer, we'll check the target groups, right? There is the Ghost ECS target group, right? That's exactly what is powering what you see here. So this site, this is what is powering it. There's the Ghost ECS target group that is given to the ALB to connect to, right? So we just need to check that. So we'll go there and check. We'll check the target group. It's this one. One is held on this one is, this is the 10.10.2.1. This is, yeah, the old one is healthy. So why is the new one? What could be wrong with the new one? Let's check. Let's go back to where we're coming from. Check the services. Check the first service. Check the task. By now you should know when I'm calling these things, what's happening. Like what I say, task, service. It's basic. Those are really the construct of ECS. The service, the task definition. Those are the three major things. Okay. Every other thing is everything you know about AWS, whether it's security group and all that. But just know in ECS is majorly three things: a service, a task definition, and a cluster. Cluster, service, task definition, and task. Right? Those are the three main things. I know deployment, people don't really manage deployments directly. Sometimes, it happens behind the scene, but deployment is also a thing. But 4 things you need to know about is that there's a cluster, ECS cluster. Inside the cluster, there is now a service, there is a task that is brought up from a task definition, right? Something is still preventing this new task from running. And we need this task for us to be able to do what we want to do. So if we check Ghost task 6, it's still saying, okay, so there's actually an exception here. So logs group.create, maybe that's the problem. So it's saying that the task exec rule does not have this, right? So we just need to fix that. So we are looking for this task exec, this one. It does not have permission to create log group. So we'll do IAM role, right? So we'll just check this. And that's why you need to know how to move around so that in case there's something wrong, you troubleshoot. You say that you're checking the logs or you're checking the task, why it's not coming up, right? So sometimes it works out of the box, but sometimes you can also run into all these problems. So what we're just going to do, we'll look for that role that is asking us for. I think it's this role. We'll just copy the role. Usually what I do is I copy the name. So it's this one. This one that is looking for. I'm just going to find the execution role here. It has some things. It has ECR logs, create log stream. It has to create log stream, but it doesn't have to create a log group. So what I'm seeing here is that we didn't really create the log group. So it's trying to create it. But if we have created the log group, we won't have this issue. So it's one of those things. So just so you know that teaching is different. You practicing it again, trying it yourself, you'll pretty much be seeing some things that are missing, right? Usually some people create log group, give it to the task. But sometimes you can also give the task, the execution role, the permission to create log group. And it knows to create the right log group and push it logs in there, okay? So that's what is missing here. So what I can do is I can actually just add a new permission. So edit, create inline permission. I'm just going to do service here is CloudWatch, right? So I think it's CloudWatch logs, right? So we want to write, right? So it's create, I think it's create log group. This is the one it's asking for, right? We can now go back to JSON and then just say the action is, I thought I just chose the what do you call it? Cloud logs. Let's see. Logs is this, CloudWatch logs. Write is what we want. Create log group is what we want. Permissions, or resource. We want to be able to create that resource. And then we'll just do next, right? So if you check this, we'll just say allow create logs, right? But this could also actually be part of the original policy. So if you check the policy, what are we doing? We're saying logs, create log group, start. Good. I think this is going to solve that problem we're having because we've already updated the task definition to a more recent one, but it's still not taking. That's a good thing. You'll be wondering that the ALB is still working. It's still going to work because there's an old task that will never be terminated until the new task is working, right? So you can see this is still going to work. It's still working. It's just that it is held by an old task. Our new task is not able to come up because there's an issue. So what we're going to do now, because we fixed the permission, what we can actually do is we'll go back to task definition, we'll go to task. This time what we can do is we can force a new deployment again to see. The most important thing, we want this to be the latest task definition. So what we can do, we'll go to the service, we'll go to Ghost service, which is this one, and then we'll just update the service, we'll force a new deployment, we can choose the latest 6, right? And then we'll just do update. So I want to believe this time, let's believe that the task is going to come up. While that is ongoing, let's check the old task. Remember we said Service Connect is just going to create a sidecar inside of your task, right? So inside of your task, there will be your container. There will also be an ECS container where the connection, the piping is going to happen from. Good. So let's try that. So what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be checking task. We'll check this task and see, and then we'll see. Can you see what's happening? You can see this is exactly what we did at the beginning. If you notice, we actually created a task. We kept 2 containers inside. So that's like a sidecar approach, and this is exactly what AWS is using here. There's like a task. A task can have multiple containers inside of it, and AWS is using that to have our own container, and then they're also adding their own ECS Service Connect container inside. Okay, so you now have one task that has 2 containers inside. What does that translate to? Let's actually go back to where we were before. So Cloud Map namespace, we had a TikTok namespace. We had one service, so it has now registered a service, right? Behind the scene, it's using this. So the service has been registered. That service is actually pointing to this port. This port is the task IP, right? Port 8000. Then if you check hosted zone, you refresh, for example, you will still notice that there's just that hosted zone, right? But behind the scene, if you check where the first implementation we had, there was a hosted zone, but there were records being created for us. So that was primarily using Route 53. But in Service Connect, we're basically using Cloud Map still, but we are not creating records inside of Route 53 again. Okay? That's one difference you're not going to notice. But again, you still have to be able to go back to Cloud Map and see exactly what's created for you. There is a namespace we created. Inside that namespace, depending on the services, if I refresh now, maybe the Ghost service will come here. But the thing is, just know there'll be a service. It's called Webhooks. And inside there would have all the definitions and what is required for you to actually reach it. Okay, cool. So what we can now do is we can go back to our Ghost service itself and see what's going on. So we'll go to task definition. We'll go to clusters. We'll start from cluster. We'll go to the cluster. We'll go to the service. We'll pick the Ghost one and check the tasks that are running, this one, and see if the 6 is running. So it looks like this time it looks like it's working because you can see running. So last state is running. Desired state is running. So what we can do, we can click on the task. Right? We still want to go to the container and also find out if that container has, you can see it has actually. So 2. So there's the Ghost, there is now Service Connect. So just know that's the difference, right? It uses Service Connect. The other one uses Route 53 to manage those records, right? So if you go back and refresh, let's refresh this, and you go to TikTok namespace, you refresh the service. I think the reason you have Webhooks here is because, we said it, like we said, Webhooks should be able to more or less should be reached, should be able to be we created Webhooks to be like a service client architecture, right? While we created the Ghost itself to just be a client, meaning I just want to be able to reach others. But for the services, for Webhooks, we said we want to be able to be reached, and we also want to be able to reach other people. And that's why there's a service created in Cloud Map for it. So maybe that's enough for you to understand the difference, right? So if I refresh this, you still see the Ghost service is not represented here because, right? Ghost, in this case, is acting as a client. Like I want to be able to reach other services. While Webhooks is also acting as I want to be reached, and I also want to reach other people. That's exactly what we did when we created it. So I think at this point, our integration is fine because if you go back, the task is working as expected, right? So it's still running. It's still saying failed health checks at this point. Let's see the logs. There is still logs here. It's shutting down. Blah, blah, blah. Ghost is shutting down. I'm not sure why at this point because the old task was working. But I'm not sure why this one is problematic. But let's see. But if I refresh, it has stopped. So for some reason, that new task is not coming up. Right? The new task itself is not coming up. Let's see. Let's actually go to the deployment and see what happened behind the scene. We had this working before. I'm not sure why I'm not sure what's wrong. Like, let's see logs. What's going on? Let's see. Probe is unresponsive. Could not get webhook. No, this is no problem. This has nothing to do with it. Probe is unresponsive. Okay, let's see. Which probe is unresponsive now? Internal server error. Probe is unresponsive. So we're basically not able to reach the service or what? But it did come up. Pinging with payload, blah, blah, blah. This is team is blah, blah, blah. Yeah. At this point, I think we just need to find out what's wrong. Because if you think about both task definition, they are the same. So let me just look at what is in the other task definition. So if you go back to task definition, that's why they're also revision, right? So this is the one that is working. This one is working. The other one is not working. But I'm not sure. Like right now, I'm not sure why. But let me just look. Let me take a quick glance and see what is going on. Let's see. This is port what? It's actually port 2368, right? That should be the port we're expecting. So let's go back here, check the task definition, do JSON and see. Wow. No, I'm not looking at the right one. So I'm going here, check the new one, check JSON to see what's in there. It's also 2368. It's just named port. True, everything is fine. So what could be wrong? It's using task role, task exec role, revision 6. Honestly, everything looks good. Everything looks good. But let me just see what's going on. Let's go back to it and see. And go back to task again. So we're going to go to the clusters. We'll go here. We'll go to the task. So we'll go to ghost service. And then we'll go to the task again and see what's happening. So it stopped. Maybe we should check the deployment. It's just the health check that is failing. But I'm not sure why it's actually failing. And it says it's unknown. But this one is actually healthy, right? So let's see what's going on. Let's see. What if we try to the load balancer itself is what is having the problem. So what we can do, let's modify the load balancer. Let's refresh. So it's draining. What was the problem actually? So task registration. But at some point it was healthy. So and then it went from healthy to draining now. Something is not right, right? Health checks. Let's modify this and see. Let's actually modify this and see what we get. Let's say on healthy threshold, timeout, interval 30 seconds. Let's take this a bit up to 10, right? So let's leave the status code as is and just let's save the health check. So we'll save the changes. Yeah, it's from the same task definition. So at this point, it doesn't even make sense why one is going to work and the second one is not going to work, right? We've seen that. Okay, what we'll do is that let's keep an eye on a new task that is coming up and see what happens. Let's keep an eye on a new task. Let's keep an eye on a new task. So it's still deactivating. So it's deactivating this one. Remember that the changes we have, if you check this task, it's still the old one, 5. It has only one container. That's not going to work for what we want to test. What we want to test is in revision 6. That's where the change is. So there's no way this is not going to work for our test. We need that new container to come up. So let's wait. So it's still deactivating. It's stopping. I'm sure after a while, it's still going to try to bring up a new one. Maybe we'll follow the deployment and see what happens. Let's see the deployment actually and see. This is the one. This is pending. Let's look at the deployment and see if there's anything meaningful there. There's nothing. It's really nothing that stands out. There's a load balancer. We know that configuration. Yeah. So task. Let's look. On failed task. Let's see. The provisioning. When was this? 8 minutes ago. And you see the health status was healthy. So why did it go from healthy and it became like now you're not? It's not something we have to. I don't know why it's like disconnecting it. But let's see. The target group, I think we did increase the timeout to 10 seconds interval. Maybe the timeout is really the issue. Let's just maybe healthy threshold. We just need 2. Unhealthy threshold, we need 2. It's fine. But we just increase the timeout. So, Let's see if that will solve the next task that we have. Let's refresh. it's trying to bring a new one. So I need to keep an eye on this one and see what is really happening. So let's see the logs. The log stream does not exist or hasn't been created. Okay, so let's refresh. Now I think the log stream has been created because of that permission that we gave to the task execution role. The log stream has now been created. We can refresh and see what's going on at some point. It's still provisioning. If we check the load balancer, we check the target group, we check this one. Let's see the targets. It's draining that one. It has finished draining. So it's going to create a new task and then register it here. I'm really interested in seeing what the problem is. Like, let's see, this is the one we're expecting. It's provisioning, it's activating. There's still no logs. There's still no logs. Okay. There's actually still no logs. Okay, something is not right at this point. Let's see. Viewing CloudWatch. Let's see. But the logs is here. The logs is here. So it's available. It's running. Database is ready. Let's refresh. Okay, maybe it just took time to come, but the logs are here. So it runs, and I hope it doesn't complain again. But let's go back to it. So when you say you're dealing with ECS in the real world, this is really what ECS is all about, right? So if you become a DevOps engineer tomorrow, you just basically need to know where to check. Like if something goes wrong, if something is wrong, where do I check? Like remember, this is not performance. We're not solving any performance issue yet. This is deployment issue. So there's a new change you're trying to deploy is faulty and something. So in this case, we saw that the load balancer was kind of like terminating the machine, right? So maybe I suspect that the timeout is too small, and I just increased it. I don't know if that fixed it, but let's check. It has stopped again. Okay, no, it has stopped the old one, right? But the new one, so I think this is it's good in this case because it looks like now the running one is 6. So it has been able to set up the 6th revision and then it's tearing down the 5th revision. So that's a good sign. It means that it was able to promote the 6th revision, right? So if I refresh, it's still running. So what I'm going to do is now to go back to the task. You remember the whole idea is to go into that container and try to connect to the other service with the new thing, the Service Connect I've created. But if you look at it, there's the ghost container, and behind the scene, there is an ECS Service Connect, which means if this guy wants to go out, he's going to reach out to this service, and this service knows how to get to the other service, right? Because that service is already created in Cloud Map, as we can see. It's here, right? So the webhook service is here. So that service will actually know how to get to it. So let's try. This is when we test. So we connect. As usual, in this case, we're using bash. We'll use bash here, and then we'll run. We'll connect. Let's let it connect. So when we finish connecting, we will use a simple command to just install some things in the machine, just for us to be able to do what we want to do. So we're just going to paste this command here, update, install some DNS utils and Coral. So let's let it install. So we'll give it time. We'll just give it time to install. So we'll now do, first of all, remember again, at this point, we cannot be connecting with the IP address because now we now have an established service-to-service connection using Service Connect. So what I can do is to do Coral, right? HTTP, I'll do this, and then I'll do webhooks, right? .tiktok is really what we called it, right? Port 8000, right? And then we'll do health again and do this, right? And that's it. We're connected. JQ, we can do this. We're connected. So this is the same thing you saw, right? You saw before, where at some point there was this, right? So there was this, but we were using IP address. But in this case, we've now been able to more or less like do the same, but now we're using Service Connect. And I'm trying to tell you that Service Connect, the way it works is that it creates its own sidecar container inside of your task. And from that task, you can basically go from one service to the other service. And that's exactly what we've done. But the good thing now is that here at this point, we can basically scale each service independently, right? So what it means is that behind the scene, we can basically go to webhooks. For example, we can go to clusters. We can do this one. We can go to task. We can go to the webhook service itself. No, let's actually go to the webhook service itself. What it means is that we can actually update this service and scale it on its own. right? So it means we can say we want 3 replicas, right? And then we can actually say update. But the good thing about this one now is that we don't really need to know those IP addresses again individually. We can basically just connect directly to the service. The service will keep track of the task, right? Task, just in case you've forgotten their containers. So in this case, we've updated it, and now you can see that we needed 3. We said 3 tasks running, and now it's bringing up 3 containers basically. So three different containers. So there will be this one, there will be this one, there will be that one. All of them having compute to run, right? At some point, because it's the webhooks container, it's going to be very fast. It's going to run. So let's see what that will look like behind the scene. So it's pending. But after a while, they are going to come up. And what I expect is that once they come up, we check the service. There is like the Go service here. When you refresh, you can basically go inside, right? So the service instance, and you can see this one is IP address this. So let's actually go back here and refresh. You can see there are now 3, right? If you remember what we did, we added what do you call it? We added 3. We increased the service to like three tasks basically. So it gave us 3 containers, and those containers were registered with CloudMap. And because we already have Service Connect will do all the picking for us. We don't need to know each of these ones, right? If you think about how it differs, in the first case, it was creating Route 53 records, but here we don't have those records. It's just one hosted zone that is created for us. Behind the scene, there is no record. But Service Connect does the magic behind the scene for us, okay? And you can see that in a namespace, there will be services. In that service, there will be instances. Instances are really what is behind the scene. And you've seen, in this case, we have 3 of it. So there's this one. It has its own IP address, its own port. It's in US West B. Again, these are, because I'm seeing US West B here because at some point, that's where you start to talk about intra-AZ communication versus inter-AZ communication. As you go deeper, you understand the difference because usually in production, you want your traffic to be intra-AZ. You want it to travel from US West B to US West B. It means if Ghost is talking to webhooks and the Ghost service is in a data zone called US West B, you try as much as possible to make the connection go on US West B. That's how you solve your the cost you incur through inter-AZ traffic. Okay, but that's like an advanced conversation. But just so you know that even the service itself knows the availability zone that the task is launched. Okay, so those are extra details that at some point will be useful for you to keep intra communication. But again, we've solved it, right? We've gone back to the same diagram and we've done it in 3 different ways, right? So I just explained what Service Connect is. Basically, your container is there. A sidecar will be added for you. And that sidecar basically controls the interactions between the services, right? And if you go back to our diagram, I think that it's basically what we want to do. Now, the only thing I want to add now is that there are many things we've still not talked about, right? There are many things we've still not talked about. Honestly, we can be on this topic for a long time, right? Cover a lot of areas, but there are many things. Because if you think about the way the task works right now, we went there and we said we wanted more containers, and all of a sudden we got 3 containers, right? But that's like a manual. That's manual. We just went there and added. You don't want that to happen. And that's why at some point you want to start thinking about auto-scaling, right? So you can go to update your service. You can go here and say, okay, I want to set up auto-scaling for this service, right? So deployment option is there. We are not touching that, but you can actually go down. Let me look for it. I think we're actually done with connecting, so I'm just going to close that. But you can actually set up, what do you call it? You can set up, I think it's on the, not networking now. Let's see. Load balancer, we already have that set up. Service auto-scaling is the only thing we've not really done, right? There are many things here, right? Load balancer, we already have one, right? We already have a load balancer. We don't have a load balancer for webhooks, right? Because we're not using we said it's one option, but we're not using it here. We're basically using Service Connect. We used the 2 patterns of service discovery for it. We're not using load balancer. But we've not talked about auto-scaling, right? Because what we did here, when we updated the service, we just said we wanted more containers. We wanted replicas, right? So replica is really more containers. But at some point, you don't want to be doing it manually. You want to be able to sleep and make sure your application can scale on its own. So that's where we can begin to introduce service auto-scaling, right? And then you can say number of tasks, maybe like the lower boundary, maybe this is the minimum, this is the maximum. You can set minimum, you can set maximum. But again, it's not just minimum, maximum. The question is, what criteria are you going to be using? And that's where you can start adding scaling policies. Remember, we've talked about these things. And this is why I always tell you that don't despise anything you are learning with AWS. They build up upon themselves, right? Auto scaling is not an ECS concept. It's there in AWS. What it means is that it's also showing up here. Target tracking, step scaling. And if you remember when we did all our introductory, we went through talking about these types of auto scaling, right? You can create a policy name, for example, test policy, policy. You can do metric. Which metric are you looking for? Are you looking for CPU? Are you looking for memory? Maybe utilization based on CPU. Let's say CPU, for example. What is your threshold? Are you targeting 70? Scale in, scale out period. Why I'm saying this thing is that this thing is still in Kubernetes. Like it's everywhere. You will see it. Scale in, scale out. Like how quickly should it scale out? Scale out. How quickly should it scale in? Right. All those are small or you can turn it off completely. Right. You can pretty much turn off scaling if you want to. But the thing is that you can do this and then you can set it up and then set how many, the main load you want. Maybe main. You always want one container to be running, and then you can say 200 as much, right? And your service is going to scale, right? It's going to scale. You can also do step scaling, right? So there are many more things you need to understand with ECS. Honestly, if you can perfect ECS, there's no container orchestration that's going to be hard. Like I think I've said it in the last call that these tools just have ways of doing it. They have their own ways of doing it, but the concept is the same. So if you know the concept in one place, that's really what DevOps is. The skill is transferable, right? If all your experience is ECS and you go to a place and they do Kubernetes, all you just need to know is how is it done in the Kubernetes world. But the concepts are going to be similar. Scaling, all these things, they are also going to be there. Okay, so that's why you should think in the form of concept and not tools, right? Tools are going to change. CI is CI, whether you're doing it to GitHub Action or you're doing the code pipeline. Okay, so try and understand things from concept-wise. What problem are you trying to solve? But just so you know that every tool, container orchestration, will have some sort of auto scaling. Maybe in Kubernetes, there are other ways of doing it. And we'll see all that as time goes on. Okay. But I think we've achieved what we want to achieve today. Just to recap, we basically created a service. Going back to our diagram, we created a service. The service now uses Service Connect. The last time we used Cloud Map, Service Discovery, and we saw that it was really controlled by Route 3. In this second case, we saw that Cloud Map is still involved. A service is created, instances are in that service that will contain all the task IPs and all that. But we didn't really need to keep you didn't need to keep records in Route 3, okay? It's just so you know, each task will have one sidecar called, Service Connect inside of it that it uses to do all the routing, the routing for you, and it also does a lot of good things for you, like the retries that we talked about. Okay, so that has been great. As usual, we usually will tear things down when we're done. Okay, so I'm thinking of how we want to go about tearing things down. If we just go Terraform and we don't destroy, it's going to bring the cluster itself down, right? It's going to bring the cluster itself down. So while that is ongoing, I'm just thinking about, did we create anything manually? We did, but we can actually tear that down after tearing down the cluster. But at this point, we're done. Okay, we're done. We're just going to be tearing things down. So I'm just going to go here and say, this is exactly how we took it up. So we did Terraform apply. And if you go back here, it's still working, right? So the UI is still working. The UI right now is using one container, but the webhooks behind the scene is using 3 containers, meaning that one has its own independent scaling. And how we can actually go back to it. So that just to confirm, you go to Ghost, you go to Service. You can see that right now, can you see where you have the task? You can see one has 3 tasks running, and the second one has 3. One has 3 tasks running, one has 1 task running. The point is that we've been able to segregate both of them, right? To say that the Ghost UI, maybe we don't have a lot of traffic, but the webhooks, maybe we have more things talking to it, and that means we can have more containers running there and have less content. So we've been able to isolate the services. We've been able to break them into more or less like the distinct groupings that we have. We can scale them individually. There's a number of good things you can do as time goes on. Okay. With that said, let me just run Terraform destroy. Okay, it's gonna. I don't think we created any. There's nothing much that we created manually, but I'm just going to go here and do Terraform destroy. It's going to bring down the ECS cluster and bring down everything. And there's a reason why I do this, because creating everything from scratch is going to be hard. So you can see it's going to tear down the NAT gateway, the route table, all those beautiful stuff that we have. It's going to tear them down. Okay, so I'm sure if I go back and refresh this page, it's not going to. It will load. It's not going to load again because something is already disconnected, right? And like you see, if it's all or none, like that's one thing about cloud. Cloud does not work halfway, right? Everything has to be together for everything to work as expected. So if just one security group rule is missing, it may not work as expected again. If just one connection is broken, it may not work, right? All right, so yeah, we've been able to destroy everything. So everything has been destroyed. I think we only had one issue where the repository did not, it was complaining. There was an error saying the repository could not be deleted because it had images. So what we did, we just went and selected all the images and we deleted them manually. And after that, the repository was deleted for us. So if you refresh, the repo is gone. And then Terraform is also saying everything has been destroyed completely. Good. So it means at this point, we've actually cleaned everything we installed, right? So if I don't think there's any other thing. I think the only thing I suspect might still be hanging is the namespace. I don't know if the namespace is still there. It's still there because we created the namespace, actually. We created it manually. We didn't create it from code. We could have, but we did not create it. So I'm just going to delete the namespace, right? When we delete the namespace, it's just going to delete the hosted zone for us. So if you check, there's still 2 hosted zones. Once we delete that namespace, it's going to delete the namespace. It's going to delete the hosted zone. And once that is deleted, I think we're good to go. We've been able to clean up everything. Okay. But every now and then, please always check your account. Just make sure you're tearing things down. Make sure you're deleting stuff that you don't need. So let's see. Let's go back to, I think this one is already deleted. We are just basically waiting for this to go. So the namespace is still deleting. TikTok namespace is now gone. Route 53 record should have been gone. It's gone. So with that all done, yeah, we can say we've been able to show everything here, right? At least everything I've drawn on this diagram, we've been able to show it. The last area we focused on was really ECS, Service Discovery with Service Connect, okay? And I hope you found it useful. Just try it, build, and keep building. Try it, build, fix. If you have any issues, you can always, look at the video again, watch and see exactly what we fixed, and that's it. You can pretty much get it done also. And that brings us to the end of the recording, like the class itself. So